Shea, we cap this episode with a fun exercise here. What does LSU need to do to land the number one class in the entire country in 2025?
Go get one of those two quarterbacks we're talking about. Hold on to Corey and Moore.
That is a start. That's a start right there. I think you've got to get Bryce Underwood. I mean, I think that helps you. We saw, whenever you can get a high level quarterback, it really helps you in the rankings. No matter what site you use, having the number one quarterback or number two quarterback, they're usually 5 stars. That gives you kind of that extra leg up on your class in terms of the ranking. I would say you look at the running back position we talked about, Harlem Berry, James Simon. That's a great haul. That should be good enough to check your running back box. You've got Corey and Moore. I think if you can get a guy like Teron Francis out of New Orleans, I don't know if they're going to push for a Russell Babineau. He's kind of one of those gadget types. They're also in really good position for guys like Ja'Cory Watson, Nashawn Montgomery, Andrew Marsh at the wide receiver spot. They've got at least one tight end they can certainly count on, and J.D. LaFleur. You've got Brett Bordelon, 4-star offensive lineman. I mentioned Lamont Rogers on the offensive line. They can keep stacking talent there the way Brad Davis is going. And then the defensive line is kind of your X factor. And then I feel like in the secondary, you've got a chance to clean up once again, with some of those guys we talked about earlier too.
Yeah, I went back and tried to see what the common theme of finishing number one was. And I thought, and it differs, like teams who have finished number one, Ohio State one year had like 9 5-stars or something like that. And Bama last year's had a 9 before, and then they'll have 7, or Georgia will have 7. The easier way for me, I found, to look at it was the average for the number 2 class across the past 5, 6, 7 years was the number 2 class usually had about 4 5-stars. So if you're going over 4 5-stars at LSU, you have a good chance at number one, because what LSU is also going to do is lock up Louisiana more often than not. I don't mean every player. I mean, you're getting more than 80% of the guys that you're after. And if you do that, for instance, right now, Billy, our On3 top 300 for next year, these guys haven't even played their junior season yet. We've already got double-digit recruits in it from Louisiana. That number goes up and up. You sign 80, 90% of them, that's 13, 14 guys who are ranked in the top 300, including 1 5-star right now in Harlem Berry. Let's say Louisiana has 2 5-stars. Well, they have another 5-star commitment already in Ja'Cory and Moore. If you get a quarterback, you'd be at 4. Can you get any more? Can you get a 5-star offensive lineman? Can you get another 5-star receiver? Can you get a 5-star on defense somewhere along the line? And if they do, they will absolutely be in competition for the number one class. And it's one of those things where people say oh, well, everyone has 4 commits. Isn't everybody in competition for the number one class? No, not at all. There's only 2 or 3 teams that ever finish number one. And it's Georgia, it's Bama, and you can toss in if any teams ever bump them off. But it's because they recruit at such a high clip, and they are able to pop 4 or more 5-stars a cycle. If LSU can get into that range, which we just described, there's a path for it. Well, let's say Louisiana cuts that number in half. Now you just need 2. You've got 1 in Ja'Cory and Moore. Can you get 1 more? That puts you at 4. As you noted, if you got an Underwood or a McIntyre, dominoes will start falling. You will get other receivers because of that. You will get a big national offensive tackle because of that, whatever it might be. So that's my recipe. How do they get there? Lock up Louisiana. You don't have to have them all. Just get more than 85% or so. If you miss on 1 or 2 guys, okay, but get the rest. And then find a way to go out of state to get 3 or 4 5-stars. And they've got 1. Can they keep going? This is probably their best chance, Billy. And hell, since as long as you and I have been doing this together, which dates back multiple websites, this is the best shot they'll have to get number one, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and this is why you've got to capitalize, because it's kind of one of those things. LSU, for example, this season, they've got a real chance to win the West. The door is certainly open. They did it last year. They've got a chance to do it again. They've got their quarterback back. They've got some key pieces. Things got to come together, but you've got to capitalize on opportunities to create momentum. And the 2025 class is one of those, without a doubt, in my mind. And they've got to clean up in Louisiana, like you said. They have to take their recruiting along, I mean, honestly, the defensive line at this point to that next level to really stack up this class too. Because if there's one thing we can probably count on, if you go back and look, it's that Bama and Georgia, they're going to sign a 5-star on the defensive line. So if you're kind of trying to go punch for punch with those two programs for the number one class, you probably got to find one along the line on the defensive side to really kind of punch back as you kind of make that bid for the number one class. But I'm with you. Bryce Underwood, Corian Moore, the Harlem Berry and Jabari Antoine, those would be, as it stands right now, 4 5-stars. You've got some others that we talked about that are right up there in 5-star conversation. So, you know, they're going to have a real chance to do it. They've got to protect Louisiana, and they've got to go out and maybe go outside of what they've been able to do in the past, which is, you know, land a national 5-star along a defensive line. Certainly a Bryce Underwood at quarterback would help. The recipe's there. They've got to capitalize on it because they have so much momentum right now too.
Yeah, you talk about capitalizing. I'll close out before we wrap up the pod with this thought too. The 2025 class is really important for LSU for 2 reasons. One, as those guys, so 2025 kids are about to be juniors. So their senior seasons, when they're playing it, when they're leading up to signing day, that's year 1 of Texas and OU being in the SEC. And at that point, you've got an expanded playoff. You've got all these different things that we've talked about, we've seen happen, we've seen the moves made, we've seen conference realignment. That all comes to a head next year. And these kids will be seniors in high school. So with all the buzz about the changing in college football, you want to be one of the teams that everybody's talking about. And what goes hand in hand with that is it's year 3 of the Brian Kelly era by then. Year 1, you've exceeded expectations far and away. You won the West. Year 2, me and Maddie B have talked about this a lot on the team podcast. Expectations are do better than you did a year ago, or at least the same. So 10 wins, maybe the floor is in the year 6 bowl. Year 3 is competing for a national championship. It's an expanded playoff. It's finding a way to get yourself through the season and into late November in contention to either win the SEC or land in the playoffs. And as I noted, that stretch of time is the same time when 2025 guys are, you know, sitting down with their parents to talk about where they're signing in December. If LSU is doing all those things, if they have improved year over year, if they are now showing to everyone, look, Brian Kelly in his 3rd year has them competing for a national championship by landing in the playoffs, and they are in the top 3 of the recruiting rankings, then you've legitimized yourself as a program under Brian Kelly. And you now have a lot more people buying into what you're doing. So I just feel like with all those different factors, for me, make the 2025 class at LSU really, really important.
And I'll finish off with this closing thought. We've seen LSU check a few more boxes, I think, behind the scenes and on NIL, and especially even outside the state of Louisiana when it comes to recruiting in the 2024 class. I think, and I've said this on the board for a couple of years now, since Scott Woodward took over, it was always something that he had to kind of get the wheels turning. And this coaching staff had to get the wheels turning on. They can't talk about it with prospects or whatever, but just getting support, drumming up all those things, it's at least starting to get going a little bit. And with the 2025 class, you would think by then that's when it's really humming at an elite level too. So we'll see what NIL looks like then. But, you know, to have a number one class, you probably have to be pretty darn strong at NIL too. So going to be really interesting to follow. But the groundwork's there for LSU to have that number one class. So it's going to be a fun one to follow. It's been an entertaining summer, Shea. I'm ready for football to start. I get to see high school football kicking it off in Louisiana on Thursday. We'll have a podcast on Thursday, get you back into a little bit more 2024 and things like that. Lots of content to come to the YouTube channel. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, like this video, do whatever. We appreciate all the support on the YouTube channel. It's exploding, and the season hasn't even started. This is Shea. We're about to enter year 2 together on 3 with you and Maddie B. It's going to be a blast this season.
Yeah, we're excited. Shout out to everyone who's been a member of the site or listens to the podcast, however you support us, we definitely appreciate it as we come up on beginning of year number 2 on the Bengal Tiger, for us at least, year number 2.
Yep. So appreciate you guys listening. Thanks, as always, for the support. We'll catch you next time with another edition of the Bengal Tiger Recruiting Podcast.